Hi, this is Santosh Kumar, your host for RunYogi Diaries, Pondering While Wandering. In this show, I want to bring you stories of ordinary people with extraordinary journeys. For most parts, this will be oriented around running, endurance sports, ultra hiking, ultra bicycling, triathlons, but we will cover a wide variety of topics. So let's see who's on the show today. Hi, today, I have a very close friend of mine, someone that I respect a lot, and we have the same name, first name. And if my dad had not named my last name based on his, I think I may even have the last name as his. So, welcome to the show, my dear friend, who's a intellectual, a seeker, a runner, an endurance sports enthusiast. He solves some very complex puzzles that I've never been able to understand, but he does it. So, welcome to the show, Santosh Iyer.
Hey, SK. Thank you for the flattering introduction. The respect is mutual.
All right. So, Santosh, we really got close as friends back in Memphis. And in fact, we started our running journey together. I remember you were on some kind of a corporate weight loss program, and I said, I'll join you for the runs, and the rest is history. We ran a lot of marathons together. So first off, really happy to have you in the show. You have a lot to offer as a human being, as a person that I know. So we'll go over many topics that's of interest to you and will be of interest to our audience. Okay. So first off, talk to us about who you are, your background, where you come from. Was endurance sports a part of your childhood? How did it all happen? Talk to us about that.
So of course, first of all, thank you for having me on. It's always nice to know what the world feels interesting. I don't see myself as an exciting person, but yes, I've been blessed to have certain experiences that you recognize as being special. So thanks for that. I from India. I live in the US, of course, now, but I was born in Kerala. Lived most of my life in Mumbai. There is no sport gene in my family, so there's absolutely been no physicality ever in my life or anybody in my family's life. So when I approached running, it wasn't as if I was approaching running. Like you rightly said, I was always fond of eating, and so I needed some weight loss at the time. So I approached it as a means to an end, right? Just to get my weight down. Fortunately, there was stimulus from the outside. My client at the time, they had a big program. It's like a contest. They had gamified it, so we were all up to it. But as we started, it became more and more serious. In terms of, hey, if I have to get running better, I need to control my nutrition. I need to control my poor habits. And then, on one day, it just kind of switched where I said, why am I pursuing a negative goal of losing something, right? And looking upon food as an enemy, right? I should pursue a positive goal, which is achieving something, and then food becomes my friend, right? Not just food, but the very habits that I consider deprivation, right? Getting up early to do something hard while others are blissfully sleeping is one way of putting it. The other way of putting it is getting up early, getting something done before the world has even started doing anything, right? Is the other way of putting it, right? So that's how the switch happened in my mind in terms of moving towards running. And then it was easy after that point. We started thinking in multiples of the distance around the lake and the trails that we used to do. So many times at the lake, so many times on the trail would give us 5 miles and 10 miles. And so it was interesting to see that journey progress. And then it became all about the running, and the weight loss was a complete byproduct. And when we did that, actually the weight loss became better because we were actually pushing ourselves harder. It was not just weight was reducing. I think the body was becoming better truly. It's about reconfiguring your muscles and your fat, and things started improving much faster. So I personally felt that anytime we want to approach a goal like this, I feel it's far more effective to shoot for something bigger than just a negative goal. And that's a bit of a background. You were part of the journey. You never had that weight loss problem, of course. You were already a runner in some ways. So your experiences combined with our discovery and I think external stimulus combined and resonated well, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all good things in life happens when you pick something, pick a goal bigger than what you think is possible, and then you impulsively commit to it. And I know our first half marathon was an impulse decision, and
Absolutely.
I think the first marathon also was an impulse decision. And said, okay, let's go do it, and then we figured out how to do it. And so, talk to us about your first marathon. I think that was in Buffalo, New York. If I wasn't that the first one you did?
That is correct. It was in Buffalo, New York, and I think it was after your first one. I mean, you out of the blue committed to running a marathon and did it. And I was having this, some kind of glass ceiling kind of thing in my head in terms of the goals, saying, "Hey, half marathon I've done, but full marathon is inconceivable." But then I think you're doing it first to kind of help break the glass ceiling. And even then, I was my usual careful self. I picked a destination where even if my marathon doesn't go well, I've got the Niagara Falls to see, right? So, hey, for having made the trip all the way, we'll make a vacation out of it. But I would say I was insanely prepared compared to the rest of the marathons. I read everything there is out there to read about marathoning, and by the time I was, considering my physical, parameters, I think I was running well as well. So I should, in hindsight, have been more confident. It was a great race, and I did all the beginner mistakes. I went out too fast. 2 weeks of taper was basically making me antsy in the beginning. And I still remember the first 20 miles being brilliant, the last 6 miles being a death march. But overall, I think the timing was good. Considering it was my first race, and true to my style, I did go back and analyze what happened. And I remember a photograph that Rohit, our common friend, he was there with me as well. He clicked at mile 9. And there's this picture of me with a couple of other runners in the background, and I could see their bib numbers. So at the end, I went and checked their timing. I finished at 4:22, and these people finished at 3:50 and 3:45. These were times that my body was not ready for yet, right? So clearly, I was running 2 notches above my league in early part of the marathon. Lots of learnings as well. So I knew that one of the conclusions for me was that I need to start slow, and there's always time to pick up the pace at the end, but the reverse is not possible. Right?
Right.
So a great experience, enjoyed it thoroughly, and then once you check that box and you can do it, then it's all about where else can I do it, right? So 16 more of them followed, as you know.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know you're a vegetarian, and there are a lot of myths around endurance sports and having to eat meat for proteins. But you being a vegetarian and now a vegan, right? So talk to us about how do you manage being a vegetarian? What are the practical tips you can give to our audience about how did you manage your endurance sports pursuits being a vegetarian? And B, how do you manage being a vegetarian in the Western world? And you've been in the West for a long time, including Europe.
Yeah. So let me answer the second question first. I mean, it's, I'm sure back in the day when 20, 30 years back, people used to move to the US or anywhere in the Western world for that matter. And I've had the experience of living in Europe as well. I'm sure it felt less easy than it is today. I mean, today it's we don't even think about it, right? There's infinite choices as a vegetarian. I've not felt deprived a single day of my living here or in Europe. And you could eat Thai, you could eat Mediterranean, you could eat Italian, you could eat Indian, you could eat Ethiopian. I mean, the list is endless. But to your first question, which is being vegetarian as a long distance runner, that too, I think is a fear that exists among people who are used to eating meat, used to hearing the soundbite that meat equal to protein and everything else is inferior, right? I don't believe so. I think there is plenty of good protein in vegetarian diets. There is there's legumes, and there is greens have protein, and of course there is the convenience of buying a protein powder on the side, right? So at the very least, if you really want to feel good about having the right amount of protein, even if it's an unbased fear, how do you care? You just plunk some protein powder into a smoothie and you're done, right? So protein wasn't an issue. I mean, but diet on the whole, I mean, I do think that the fatty nature of some of the stuff that we eat, the oily stuff that we crave, those are enemies. Those are really enemies. And I could sense that. At some point, there's a fork in the road. It's just like smokers who decide to run. At some point, there's a fork in the road saying, do I care enough about smoking to not run better than this? Right? It's the same for everybody. The fork happens a little bit later if you're used to indulging, and then you have to say, hey, is that packet of cookies or that bhajia or whatever, is that attractive enough for me to say goodbye to a good run tomorrow? So at least how my mind works is that when I'm committed to a goal, then I kind of align the rest of the world along with it for myself. So it was easy to give up all those indulgences. And once that is out of the way, I consider diet as something that you get enough of good stuff. If you can avoid the bad stuff, you're set. Right? I would say that more than diet, what I found that we ignore is injuries. I mean, that I thought was a far bigger lesson for myself. We, in our fervor, in our enthusiasm, we overstretch. We not overstretch, but do too much too fast, right? So taking it slow and easy, not just starting races slower, starting runs slower, but starting your progression also slower, right? Keeping it well paced and giving yourself time. I still remember we did our first half marathon within 6 weeks of starting to run. It's insane. It's unnecessary, right? We pulled it off, but it wasn't required. And at some point, injuries did catch up with me. And the sudden switch of lifestyle also caught up with me. I yo-yoed multiple times between being fit and being not so fit. So I would say, having a more considered, measured approach is probably worth its weight in gold.
Right, and I think I've always seen you come back. I know I'm aware of some of the injuries you dealt with, but you always come back, and that's a great mindset. I think a lot of our people who are listening to this are probably, in their early days as pursuing their endurance goals, and they get worried. Oh my God, I got a little leg pain here or a knee pain there. And I think you're a great testimony of none of that is permanent. It heals sometime. And if you use the right nutritional strategies and that you use the right strategy, you come back. So that's a great time to also talk to you about, you also become a vegan. So it's not just vegetarian, right? You move to a vegan lifestyle. So talk to you about what is veganism, why veganism, why should someone who's pursuing fitness and well-being pursue veganism?
Got it. So let me start off by saying that my answers may not please all the purists out there, right? And I honestly don't care, right? The right definition is that we as humans somehow have trained ourselves to believe that everything that's out there is available to exploit, right? In fact, not too long before now, even humans were fair game to exploit. Well, even today, for that matter, right? So anything that's non-human, of course, is for us to exploit, right? So, and that's the way the world has been, right? Whether it's about digging into the earth and picking out minerals, or consuming oil, or throwing, littering, or polluting the air, or cultivating animals just to cull them, kill them, use them, eat them, right? So veganism, ethical veganism, is the choice to not exploit animals for one's own good. Now, there is a limit to how much you can do this, right? You can go to the extreme and say, hey, I'm killing bacteria when I'm having antibiotics or whatever. That's ridiculous extremes. Or even if you go and do your shopping at Costco, they sell meat, and your business, your revenue actually, helps them sell the meat, right? So in one way. So there are limits beyond which we can't go, but to the extent that we can control, and to the extent that is fairly easily practical, right? Not exploit animals for your own good. That's ethical veganism. The reason I introduced the term ethical veganism is different from, there are people who turn vegan for their own good. No harm in that. The outcome is still the same, but the driver is different. Like people say, hey, I'm trying to remember the name of the show. I think it's, it skips me now on Netflix. It's a movie, right? Talk about the pro athletes who gave up meat, right? And that's shown that they improve their performance, improve their endurance, right? And also improves their body parameters. So that is also true veganism, except it's not driven by ethical reasons. I personally am vegan for ethical reasons. I was woken up to this fact by a very good friend of mine who's been vegan for 15 years now, and has always been trying to, educate me about the issues that lurk behind, the apparent happy cows give great milk, right? So he simply said, just follow the money, right? Just follow the money. Just put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's running a dairy or a meat business and think about what will give you profits, right? It is impossible to make profits in a commodity like that without doing the obvious stuff. It's about production. So if something is not producing as well, you let go of it and bring something else that's fertile and producing. So it's natural to kill male calves. It's cows get culled for parts of their body after their milking days are over, after they're spent, right? So the economics of the industry force you to behave in a certain way. Now, this is not the truth that is revealed to everybody. But if you think, if you're mindful about what you're having and you think a little bit about where it comes from, not just mindful about what you're eating, but where it comes from, it becomes very obvious very quickly that the industry is built on cruelty. So the choice is, he said, look, now you know it, right? Now the choice is, he used some words to prod me, but then the choice was, hey, you can be stupid or you can be willfully denying this, right? Stupid because you don't realize it, or willfully denying. So for me, he made it as stark a choice. And honestly, I'm a vegetarian since birth, so it was fairly easy for me to switch. Many times I found the switch is just as simple as buying from this aisle versus buying from this aisle, right? If I'm buying vegan leather shoes, vegan leather is like for leather. It's about going to one website, picking one product versus another. So long as they function the same, how do I care, right? So frankly, 50% of the switch is just, absolutely you won't even notice that you've switched, right? And the rest is not as hard as people see it. It's not. The biggest obstacle for people, in terms of turning vegan is that they feel there's some deprivation involved, right? I'm going to lose out on, X or Y, and I'm going to have bad tasting food. So shameless plug, but very relevant. I mean, I would, Anusha, my wife, she's a vegan as well, slightly longer than I've been. She's got an Instagram page, Yummy Yatra. Her goal is just put, interesting recipes that are easy to make, tasty. Well, if you get good food, then it's easy. It's not much of a sacrifice. And for all the athletes out there, consider this, at least, at the very least, it'll improve your body. It'll improve your performance. It's proven. But, your side benefits that you're ethical as well. Right? So that's my philosophy experience. It's been now, 2016, so it's 3.5 years now. And there are times when I have slipped, or in times when I did not have the ability to be fully vegan, especially during travel, a particular meal here or there. But at home, it's been 100% vegan. At travel, most of the times vegan. And I've just found that it's easy, and you feel better as well.
Great. Full disclosure, I'm not a vegan. I've not switched that
I know that.
yet. But yeah, but I respect that point of view. I think the world is full of ideas, and it's very important to get these ideas out. Now, whether you choose to, pick it up and make it a lifestyle or not, is an individual choice. But I think your case for it is very compelling, especially coming from ethics. And I know you are also a seeker, and you're someone who is pursuing minimalism and compassion as a lifestyle. So, talk to about minimalism. What is minimalism, and how do you practice that in your life?
So, sure, SK, I think I should make one more point, because you said you're not a vegan. I've got a small message for people who are not vegan yet. Don't fret. It's not about making a switch overnight. It doesn't need to be. Purist vegans are going to hate me when I say this. And that's when I said my message may diverge from theirs. I don't think it's any problem to do meatless Mondays. I don't think it's a problem to try out a good dish. So what if it's vegan? It's incidental that it's vegan. Try it. You like it. You try it 2-3 times and it becomes a part of your staple diet. And then that's one meal less that you're being non-vegan, and you're not missing anything, right? So it's okay for the switch to be gradual, and I'll go out on a limb and say that, for the next few years, you're not vegan. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're progressing the right direction. And I'm sure if somebody listens to this, some of those vegans are going to be like hurling bricks and stones at me. I'm fine with that. That's a small message. Sorry for the digression, but back to minimalism, your question. So let me speak about what it's not, right? Because most people have a misconception of what minimalism is. The term may be misleading. People think it's about doing less of something, right? It's about miserliness, and it's about economy, or it's about whatever. It's about giving up, right? That's what the term suggests. It is indeed about doing less, but less is more, right? So I would define it as doing less of what you have to do, so you can do more of what you want to do, right? It's about freedom, right? So today, if I have to sustain a huge home, and I need to have these fancy cars, and I need to be wearing clothes that my neighbors will approve of, right? And I need to have a certain kind of granite flooring or a certain kind of furniture, because when Miss A or Miss D comes home, that they would be impressed. True, yeah, that's one way to think about it. But what happens is that you're slaving away. The stuff owns you, because you now have to pay for it. You now have to work probably 5 years longer to ensure that you've got a house that is $250,000 more. And then you have to clean all that stuff, and if you have horizontal services, you need to have stuff to put on them, right? And you need to have room to keep them, and it just blows out of proportion, right? And frankly, all of this for what? For nothing. It doesn't give you intrinsic pleasure. If it does, go for it. And then it doesn't matter if Miss A or Miss B or your neighbor. It's not for them, it's for you, right? So I would say that I consider time as the most valuable commodity, more than money, more than anything else. And that's the one thing that's for sure is running out, right? That's a given, right? The clock is ticking at the same pace. So how do I make the most out of my seconds here, right? So the more I end up doing what I need to do, what I have to do, then I compress the time that's available for what I want to do. And so it's just plain logical for me that let me not do that. Let me not do the trade-off, right? Let me keep what I want to do as the center. So, and I'm applying it to all aspects of my life. It's not just about expenses. It's about things. It's about people. So I have a close circle of friends, and we've been close enough for the last so many years, and that. So I'm not a big hobnobber. Don't believe in having 500 people that I want to keep up with. I want to keep up with my 30 and keep up with them well, because I like spending time with them, right? Similarly, I've stopped. I live in a house that is 1,400 square feet, and perfect space for the three of us, family of three, and Neo, right? Our dog. So it's perfect. It's got enough room when guests come in. It's got no excess room. There's not even a single room in the house we don't use. We didn't go out and buy any fancy cars. And I think that the other thing that it does is when stuff gets out of the way, you have room for experiences, right? So you can go out and travel more, right? You can go out and do more things. And as we've all seen from all happiness studies, experiences are far more, they count a lot more in your happiness than stuff, right? You don't get hedonistically adapted to experiences like you get to stuff. So that's my view on minimalism. It helped that I was always that way. I wasn't attached to stuff much ever. I'm blessed that I'm that way. But my family is also very much in tune with that. Anusha is my wife. She's very adaptable. She quickly adapted this lifestyle. She likes it. Gaia is natively growing up that way. So it's again not much of a sacrifice. It's just it's just the way we are.
Yeah. No, what I hear, when you say these two topics on veganism and minimalism, is that I hear someone in pursuit of a conscious living. We all end up living lives 45, 50, 60 years. And a lot of who we are and what we do is automatic. And there's enough studies now on neuroscience that shows that free will is actually a myth. That a lot of choices that one makes is automatic. It's given by culture. There's a lot of stored memory in our brain. So in a lot of what you're saying, in terms of living ethically, it's a pursuit of living consciously, overriding basal instincts to live a higher order of life. Obviously, that for selfish reasons. It gives you happiness. You're healthier, just for selfish reasons, not for any moral reason or any political or ideological reasons, but just for your own self-well-being. So that's what I hear in what you're saying. So I know you said minimalism allows you to do a lot of things that are interesting, especially travel. And I know you're a big traveler, and you did a mega travel to accomplish a bucket list, which not many people would do. You spent 30 days, if I recall, out there hiking the Camino Santiago. We'd love to hear. So talk to us about why did you pick that as your bucket list? What was the why behind it? What did you discover about yourself in the journey? Talk to us about that. Give us, maybe start with some logistical information on if someone wants to do it, what do they do? And then give us something about what was it for you like?
Sure. Now, I realize I'm doing this in every question, but your comment, I have to address that. Superbly articulated. You said, you talked about being conscious of your living, and you called it higher order living. I couldn't have put it better myself. There is this word that is, mindfulness, which many of us would have heard, right? So being mindful is just being conscious, being aware of what you're doing. And I see, whether it's veganism, whether it's minimalism, are just different. It's just mindfulness at play, right? It's mindfulness when you eat and you think about. You don't, just eat food automatically, but you think about where it comes from. You might reach veganism as a conclusion. When you look at stuff, when you look at buying or lead your life, you think about it mindfully. It would lead you to minimalism as a conclusion. So you were bang on, and I'm probably going to steal the way you described it when I described it to friends.
Yeah, sure.
Now, Camino de Santiago, that's one of the best experiences of my life. Most people don't know what it is. So I probably add a couple of lines on what it is first of all. So Camino de Santiago it translates to Way of St. James, and it is Santiago, St. James in Spanish, and it's a medieval Christian pilgrimage route. Right now, there are many routes that go from different parts of Europe, and they all converge into this one city called Santiago de Compostela in northwestern Spain, and that's where St. James is supposed to be buried. I'm not religious. I'm not Christian. But the journey has evolved now into being a journey of various kinds for various people. It is religious for the people who are seeking to go to the church. It is spiritual for people who want to take some time off and think and do something different as they're thinking. It is sport for many people. It's an adventure, right? There are people who do it on a bike. There are people who do it on horseback. There are people like me who do it walking. Depending upon the route you choose, the distances vary. I picked the one that's called Camino Frances, which is the most common route. It starts from a town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France. It is on the border. It's on the French side of the border between France and Spain, and it's just by the Pyrenees, which is the natural border between the two countries. And then you climb over the mountain, enter Spain, and then you walk all through the width of Spain, and you reach this town. And that's where your journey ends. Now, there is another extension called the Camino Finisterre. Finisterre means end of the world, literally in Latin. So that's basically continuing from that point, from that town, Santiago de Compostela, all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. It's just another 100 kilometers, 3 days of walk. And then you get to finish the Atlantic Ocean. So in my case, I chose for the Atlantic Ocean to be a more logical endpoint. Why this? Why take this journey at all? And why this journey and not some other journey? So SK, our lives, and we are, deep in the commercial domain, like anybody who is a working professional, every conversation at work, it's all about money, money, money. Hey, this conversation, am I making the revenue out of it? Is it profitable for me? Right? What are you gaining out of it? It's all about money all the time. And we end up spending, 10 hours, 12 hours doing just this, right? So we kind of conditioned to think about everything. Hey, what's in it for me? What's the utility of this conversation? And then in the precious little time that leaves us, there's not much else, in terms of variety of people that we meet, right? It's the same friends who work in the same kind of companies. They get together the weekend and half the time talk about work, and it's just a bubble, right? So how do, I really wanted to kind of detox myself from this way of thinking. and also open myself up to meeting some people who are not driven like this, right? It is not common, and like you said, it's beyond the realm of possibility for most people because they make it so, right? So people like this do not do that, right? And therefore people who do that are going to be different. So when I go and meet them, I'm going to first of all meet kindred spirits who want to do something different, and they could be from any other background, right? And indeed, it was amazing. I mean, the I'll come back to the logistics of it, but just to complete this thought, there were people from all walks of life, young people, old people, people starting off on their careers and their lives, and people who are in the fag end of it, very very old people, people who are dealing with a problem, people who are there for adventure, commercially highly successful people as well, right? So it breaks the monotony. It gets you exposed to a different set of people. It snaps you out of your normal way of thinking, and probably drives home some home truths that you can then carry on for the rest of your life. So that was the intent. It was a vague notion, but I knew that it's different enough for me to come back with something, right? Now, what I came back with was specific, and that's post the experience, right? I'll cover that later. Logistics wise, it is so. Like I said, it's in Europe, so it's a developed part of the world. Why this journey? Why didn't I just choose to walk the same distance in the US somewhere, right? What I needed at that point was not a physical roughing it kind of a journey, like the Appalachian Trail, amazing, beautiful solitude, but it's rough, right? I mean, I have to tent every night. I have to look out for bears and not meet people for days on end. That's not what I was after, right? I was after the ability to think. So I was not after a physical journey. I was after a mental and spiritual journey. And so I needed to get the physical stuff out of the way. So I needed places to stay that are reasonable, right? If I can get a bed in a dorm, I'm good with that. Right? A bunk is good. Good. I want to find food. I don't want to struggle for it. I don't want to cook. I don't want to lug a huge amount of stuff. It's about snapping out of what I'm doing, right? So hence I wanted something that is fairly popular in the sense that many people do it enough for there to be infrastructure to support something like this. And this is no-brainer. This is the most popular. You don't walk through crazy terrain. You do have mountains that you have to cross, but it's a well-worn paths, well signposted, right? You're not going to be, in wilderness without a cell phone connection. I had a Spanish cell phone the whole time. So it just was a logical, practical choice, right? In terms of going there. Second, I watched this movie, again, The Way. That's the name of the movie, The Way. So it is a Hollywood movie, and it basically set in the Camino de Santiago about a doctor whose son does the journey, but dies just as he was starting the journey, and the doctor goes there, and they had an estranged kind of relationship. The doctor goes there to pick up his stuff, and then he, on an impulse, decides to complete the journey and his experiences, and how he comes back a transformed person, right? That's the most popular, that's the most easy way to find out more about the Camino, but there's hundreds of videos out there. I was in awe of this whole thing, right? This whole experience. A friend of mine, Prabhu, he had done a part of it, and he was always waxing eloquent about that 1 week that he did. So that's how I picked that place. Do you want me to cover something like preparation? Sorry.
No, and I think, what I want to say is that what you said, somewhere hides the fact that you were out there walking for 500 miles. So it's a phenomenal feat, right? You were out there 30 days. It's almost like a induction into monkhood, right? I've heard of people going to these 30 days. I mean, if I were, I'm sure most of us who are listening to this probably saying, if I was out there for 3 days, I might want to get back and look at my WhatsApp and social media, because that's how we have got wired today, right? But it's an amazing feat that you've accomplished, while the practical aspect of it you say, but what you did is no way practical. It's an amazing feat of endurance. It's a feat of mental fortitude, discipline. Really great. So talk to us about if somebody wants to do it, right? How do they start? Talk about some training tips. I know you were doing a lot of training before you went. So give us some tips so that people who are interested to get going on something like this can either reach you or learn something.
Sure. So the distance that I did was about 575 miles. So it's roughly 65 miles for from Camino de Santiago to the ocean. So if you don't want to do that, then it reduces to 515, but still a fairly large distance. And over 30 days, first of all, you don't have to do over 30 days. You can take 50 days. It doesn't matter. It just depends on what your life allows you to do. Many people I know and I met on the journey were not doing it in one stretch. They used to do sections. So people who live in Europe, especially, they can come, do a week, go back, and then next year do another week from where they left off and continue on. Over 4 or 5 years, they complete the journey. So there are many ways of doing it. No one way. It's your journey, your rules, right? It's a public road. You're not following any group. That's the best part, right? But I think it's very important that it be long, right? So you don't snap out of something in a day or a couple of days or even a week for that matter. So when I started on the journey, and I think I'm in France and I have to reach the Atlantic Ocean, right? And it's going to be 30 days. And after the first day, you realize, oh my gosh, a day is long, right? So it seems interminable. For all practical purposes, you cannot see the end of it, right? The other thing is it's a one-way journey, right? It's not a loop. So it's not like you can keep some stuff there, come back on your next loop, pick it up. Once you leave a place, it's the last time you're going to see it, at least on that trip, right? So which means that everything you have, you carry, right? And a pound is, feels like a ton when you carry it, lug it over hundreds of miles, right? So the whole discipline of, what feels like, oh, how am I going to manage with 20 pounds or whatever, right? Through this entire journey, I'm like, what if it rains, or what if this happens? What if it feels cold? I need to have winter wear, and what if I get hurt? Etc., etc. So there's a lot of what ifs that people think about and plan for. So the first thing that I would say somebody needs to do is to decide what not to take, right? What we need is surprisingly little. We are going to pass a big city every week in that journey anyway. When you start, you pass through Pamplona, then in another week you pass Burgos, then another week you pass Leon, and by the time you're so into the journey, you get the hang of it, right? And then you reach Santiago. So it's honestly no big deal. But you don't know that when you start, right? Second is food. As a vegetarian, it was another thing that we had to think about because, it's a meat-loving country, especially, in the cities, there's no problem. You get everything you want. You get vegan food. I did enjoy vegan food at a restaurant named Gaia, incidentally, in Leon. But for most of the journey, you've been small villages, tiny villages, 50 people, 100 people. But we have to remember that these are villages that exist and cater to travelers. And these travelers are multicultural, right? So you do get pasta. Everybody would make a generic pasta, pretty good. You get salads all the time, no problem. You get, the specialities, delicacies of each region. And like there is this torta de Galicia, which is the last final part of the journey. Amazing cake. I wasn't vegan then, it's not vegan. But so there's enough food. And the worst days, there's some days you have to eat your bunch of fries and they've got this nice sauce that goes with it. Unhealthy, but who cares? You're burning, truckloads of calories. So I ate, more than my fair share of fries and came out much thinner at the end. So packing is super important. Second is quality of gear, right? Do not compromise on quality of gear. Get the best backpack you can get. We still use this backpack for all our trips. These are deceptively small looking, but they can pack a lot. Not only they can pack a lot, they have all these nifty pockets and things that you can hang stuff. You have carabiners and you got side pockets and front pockets and pouches and all of that. So amazing variety of storage in that little bag. Second is the way it is designed, and I never knew this at all until I went to REI and got myself fitted. And you have to get yourself fitted for a backpack. Like you can't just buy one that you like, the color that you like. When I got myself fitted, and he started nipping and tucking those different, straps on the bag, and suddenly it started feeling like part of me, right? It just stuck in the right places, and the weight was getting distributed. So you have a strap on your chest, you have a strap on your waist, you have your, shoulder strap, and the weight was getting distributed uniformly across all of those, and 20 pounds just melted away, right? So 20 is not much, but when you have to walk a long distance, it melts away. Third is I did carry, 22, I think, finally, but then first half of the journey, I had shoulder ache and I had to, walk with one shoulder strap off. That just makes it worse for the other shoulder, right? Then I realized I'm not using half the stuff. So I threw some stuff and I had a couple of friends on part of the journey that were with me that went back after they did their week or 10 days, Prabhu and Shashi. So I gave my stuff to them to mail it back home. And I walked with 14 pounds for the second half of the journey. Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I was on air, right? By the time my body had shed weight, my lungs were, filling with oxygen because I've already walked like, well, I don't know, 250 miles. And, so the backpack is one with you. So that's one. Shoes, right? You have to buy the best possible shoes. You don't want to get stuck, in a 900-kilometer journey with your shoes giving way sometime, right? You have a choice of buying low cut or high cut boots, and I bought slightly higher cut because you do have to cross certain areas where it's like a stream or whatever. You have to put your foot in it. You don't walk with wet socks most of the way. The shoes that I bought were waterproof. The name of the brand is Loa Renegades. For those who are interested, there are many other competing brands, but Loa Renegades, I would vouch for them any day. I walked 1,000 kilometers in them, and they were just as new at the end. Amazing, right? Not even a single drop of water entered my foot throughout the journey, right? Third is breaking in. These shoes are heavy. They're not like a running shoes. They're quite heavy. So break in those shoes before you go, which leads me to training, because you might as well train in them, right? So I used to take a backpack, fill it up with stuff. We used to fill it up with, Indian store dals, right? The 4-pound baggage, and put like 20 pounds in there, put water bottles. And I trekked, went with a few friends to a local parks, and I trekked on the roads just to get experience of different kinds of terrain, right? One which is smooth, one which is rough. I also did some steps. And then I pushed the distances, and then I started feeling for how the bag feels on me. How do I, when it aches here, I pull this strap, if it aches here, I pull the strap. So you get a feel for all of that, right? You know how your shoes behave. I also learned to walk with my hiking poles. They're very, very useful. There are times when you rely on it. There are steep inclines downwards that are, you really have to break your, otherwise you could topple, sharp stones, rounded stones. So you have to get used to walking with those poles. So I did that kind of training. Distances weren't that much. Weather was in the way when I was doing my training. But then I don't think you can fairly train for something like this to the fullest extent. And the initial part is always about learning, and then later on. So I still maintain that the first week, 10 days is about getting the physicality of the journey out of the way, right? Right equipment, right pacing, make sure that you have blisters, for example. You can have blisters and they can kill your journey, right? You have a blister today and then you have to walk 20 miles on it tomorrow. And every day is a 20-mile journey, right? So, if you have blisters, you better take care of them right then and there, right? And the better the equipment, the fewer the blisters. So once you have got all of that right, then you're free and liberated. Then you have your mental part of your journey, which is the second half, right? I hope that helps. I mean, of course, people are free to contact me. Yeah.
So, first off, I never knew that you get fitted for a backpack. I have a bicycle that got fitted for me, but can't imagine getting fitted for a backpack. But that makes a lot of sense. If you want to be with it for that long, then it makes a lot of sense. So I'll definitely like to. I know you have a blog on this as well, and if you're okay to share that, I can share that in the meeting. The show notes. If people
Sure.
want to read about your journey and want to contact you more about this information, that'll be a great place to go, right?
Absolutely. I can share the URL with you. And, you said about being distant from social media. That is kind of the only media that I had to connect. One thing I neglected to mention is that, while doing something that is quite different from our usual lives, I thought it's a great opportunity to do something good for the world as well. So, it raised some funds for 3 causes that are dear to me, and many friends, you including, contributed generously. So the causes were, education for the underprivileged and taking care of animals and the environment. And people had a choice to contribute to whichever cause they wanted, and all of my friends were very, very generous. So I owed it to all the people who contributed to give them an update on where I am. So that's what drove the blog. But then it ended up being a way for me to record my own memories and experiences. And to this day, I go back and read it, once in a while, just reliving those memories. So this May, I completed 4 years after the journey. So I did one whole round of the blog again in May.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'll share with you the URL.
Yeah.
Happy to. Yeah.
Great. So Santosh, I think it was I really loved this conversation, and I think we touched on some very, very deep and topics that people will need to probably pursue and introspect even further. These are very important topics, and I'll definitely like to share your contact on the meeting notes through the blog. And if people want to talk to you about some of these topics, they can reach out to you. So any last word? I mean, before we wind up the show?
So let me think. I think what you said stayed with me, and I think that is the whole. Hey, we live life in a certain pre-programmed way, and some of us are fortunate. Many of us are fortunate to have basically been snapped out of the world we were born in to the world where we're living in today, which is very different, right? Beliefs are different. Culture is different. Everything is different. So we, for at least for us, right? I can speak for us. We have seen that there are multiple valid ways of living life, and so you don't have to live the way you were born, right? So you can choose to live other ways. And so when we are making the choice of living life in one way versus another, I think it's just one or two steps away from thinking about, do I follow this herd now instead of following that herd? Why do I follow a herd at all? And when it was okay for me to say goodbye to that herd, why am I now automatically joining another herd, right? So, so I would think that there's a huge amount of potential hidden in everybody's life, and I still search for that potential in my life. And I think that a little bit of search yields a ton of results, right? So I would encourage people to question, consumption, the way we consume it. And this consumption is not just food, not just stuff, not just money, not just time, it's all of it. So I towards a more mindful future for everybody is what my last, parting message would be.
Great. No, thanks a lot, Santosh, for joining the show. I'm sure, I hope everybody enjoys this conversation, takes something away, and would like to think further. So thanks a lot. Until the next time, have a great day and have a wonderful weekend.
I truly enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. I look forward to all your further future episodes as well. I'm sure I'm going to be listening intently and enjoying the conversation. Thanks, SK.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Bye.